Hello there, my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and today I'm going to show you how to make this Harlequin Wirework Bracelet. Now, just to let you know, these are available for sale in my shop as well, so if you're interested, I'm going to leave a link to it in the description box down below. Otherwise, if you want to learn how you can make one yourself, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. Now, the wire that I'm using is a silver coated regular round copper wire. And the first gauge here is a 1mm, and this is going to be the base wire. Next, I have a 0.4mm for the weaving wire. Then the beads that we'll need are 6mm bicones. And here I'm using two different colours. So the first one is Chrysolite Opal and the second one is Blue Zircon. But of course you can mix and match your colours however you want to, or even just use one. Then we're going to need our findings. So I'm using a locked claw clasp and extender chain, and of course some jump rings. So we can attach our findings to the ribbon ends. And for the ribbon ends, I'm also using this E6000 glue for the extra security. So the main tool we're going to be using is this wire crinkler tool, and as you can see it has a base, and then we have these two little kind of cogs that when you add them onto it, they slot together like this, and you can use this handle and you feed your wire through the bottom here that has a hole in it, and you get this perfectly zigzagged wire by feeding it through and pushing it between the cogs there. And of course we need some wire cutters, so I'm using these heavy duty flush cutters because we're using a thick gauge wire. And also my tweezers and nose pliers to help manipulate any wires that we need to. Now the material list and useful link will be in the description box below the video, so go there and have a look. Otherwise, let's get our materials and tools ready and let's get started. Then we need to cut a length of wires, and first of all I have 10 lengths of my 1mm of about 25 centimeters each. And we need 2 lengths of a 0.4mm of about 3 meters each. Then we also need a shorter length of the 0.4mm of about 50 centimeters. Now all the lengths will of course depend on the size of the bracelet that you're making as well. So I'm going to start out using the wire crinkler tool, and I'm grabbing 2 lengths of the base wires and just using one at a time. I'm going to feed it through the hole in this little block and then make sure it goes in and catches between these little cogs, which can be a little bit tricky to begin with, but just get it catching. And then you can use the handle here to help push it through and just keep rotating these, and you can see we get perfectly zigzagged wire coming out on the other side, and just zigzag the whole length until we have this, and then just grab the other length and do the same thing. Now if you find yours has a bit of a curve like this, just gently straighten it out, obviously without losing any of the zigzag. Then I have these 2 lengths of zigzagged wire, and we need to then start incorporating the beads into this. So what I'm going to do is grab my short length of 0.4mm here, and first of all we just need to attach these 2 lengths together. So I'm just going towards one end, just leaving a short tail of the weaving wire as well, go underneath it, and then I want to bring the wire right underneath where 2 points meet each other, and you want them to come straight opposite like this. So if you have a line down the middle, it's a mirrored image. Then I'm just going to wrap around these 2 wires on that point that meets up 3 times. So we basically reach the point where the wires start opening up into this kind of diamond shape or square. Then we need to add the very first bead. So I like to kind of just bring my weaving wire through the 2 base wires. Then I'm going to add a bead to the very end of the wire, let it drop all the way down, and then as it comes down here I just want to lift it up just ever so slightly, so we have just a short little length of wire between where it comes out from and where the bead starts. And then I want to bend that against my wires so it gets a little bend in it, which is going to make it sit nice and flat. And then I bring it back down through the 2 base wires so it comes behind them again, and you can see then this bead is going to slot in just perfectly because of that bicone shape. And then to fasten the bead in place, I'm coming down behind the base wires again, and then I'm just going to literally wrap around the 2 base wires on the next point here where the 2 points in the zigzag wire meet up again 3 times, just to get to the next open space where we can add in another bead. So again, bring the wire through so it comes up in the middle there, add the next bead, and I'm just alternating my colors, obviously that's up to you. Then bring it down and then just bend it again slightly, so it's going to end up sitting flat. Bring the wire back down between the base wires and come down behind at the next point where they meet up, and basically this is how we're going to move along the whole way and add in the beads right up until we have the length that we need. So now I've done the full length that I want for my beads, bearing in mind that this length isn't the full bracelet. We're going to make more on the ends with more weaving, so this needs to be shorter than the actual final length you want your bracelet to be. But I then just want to finish off these ends here, and it's the same on both. So I'm going to go and take my flush cutters here and first of all cut off the excess of the base wires, and I'm doing that right up against my last wraps there. So put the back of your pliers against them, cut off the excess, same with the other one. And then I want to also cut down the length of my weaving wire, but I want to make sure I just leave a short little tail of about 1 millimeter or 2, so something like that. Then I just take my tweezer nose pliers, and we obviously want to make sure that we keep the wraps where they are. You don't want them to slip off. But then I'm just going to grab the very end there and bend it inwards, and then I want to end up tucking it down into the little gap within the wraps. So basically that's just getting rid of the end of the wire there. And then what I personally like to do is, because this end obviously is prone to kind of unwrapping or slipping off the base wires if something catches on it, so to avoid that, I grab a little bit of my glue on a toothpick, and then I just want to basically seal up the end here, because there's also a bit of gap, like I said, within the wraps, and then that seals up that gap, but also makes sure that the wires stay in place, and the very end of the wire that we cut off there stays within, plus it makes them so they're not scratchy and catch on clothes or skin. So I'm just going to literally seal that end off, and it's going to be very unnoticeable because once the glue dries, it does dry clear anyway, so you won't really be able to notice it. So just fill in that nicely and leave that to dry, and of course we need to repeat on the other end as well. So then I'm grabbing my remaining base wires here, and I'm just going to take one at a time, and then also one of my long weaving wires here. So I want to attach this weaving wire first of all. So I'm just going to go towards both ends. We don't need to leave too much of a tail in either, just enough to kind of hold on to. Then I'm just going to wrap it around once to attach it. I'm going to get straight on with the weave that we're going to do, which also means I need to bring in my next base wire, lay that above the other one on top of the tail of the weaving wire, and I'm going to be doing the diagonal wire weave first of all. So I'm going to go over the top of both of them and then come up between the two, and then place in my next base wire over the top of the top two, up between them, push that down, and just continue like this with all of the base wires. And then once I add in my final base wire, I just want to go around that top one by itself, just like we went around the bottom one by itself when we attached the weaving wire, and then come down behind all of them, because now I just want to start another round, the exact same weave, except now we don't have to add in the base wires. So I'm just going to go around the bottom one by itself, over the top of the bottom two, come up between them, push it down, over the top of the next two, come up between those, and again just work your way all the way to the top in the same way. And again, just wrapping around the top one by itself to finish off this round of the weave, and come all the way down behind. And what I just like to do as well is, as I'm doing this weave, just kind of push the wraps together and straighten it out. And we just want to do a few rounds of this, so we end up with a little section here. So now I have that little section, I then want to separate out my base wires here. So just right down the middle, I'm going to have 4 towards one side and then the other 4 towards the other side. And now I'm going to change to doing a different weave. So I'm also just going to be focusing on these 4 wires now. So the wire was coming down behind them all. I'm bringing it up in the middle there. So it's just coming down behind the top 4 base wires. So I want to create a bit of spacing first. So I'm just going to wrap around the bottom base wire by itself and make sure to push it all the way down. And I personally, I'm just going to do it 5 times. And then I want to bring it over the top of the bottom 2. So down between the middle of the 4 base wires, push it down, come up between those 2, over the top of the next 2. And now what I want to do is, instead of coming down behind, I want to bring it up behind the very top one, and then just wrap around that one by itself. And then I want to bring it down behind, come up between the bottom 2, because this is kind of the midpoint of the very top that we just made. So I now want to move my way back down and basically mirror the other side that we just did. Over the top of the middle 2, push it down, come all the way down, and then bring it over the top of the bottom 2. So just like that. And then I just want to wrap around the bottom one by itself again. And we just completed the first little flourish of the weave. And now again, wrapping around the bottom one is then creating the spacing between each of them. And like I said before, I'm going to do 5. You can do more or less if you want more spacing or less spacing between them. That's up to you. And then I just want to make another little flourish. So this is going to be the second one. Just do that in the exact same way. I'm then just going to leave that for now. And then I want to move down to the bottom base wires there. And for that, I'm going to grab my other long weaving wire. So again, starting right towards the end, I'm going to put that behind the base wires, but now from the top, because we want to do the same weave as I just did on the top ones, but in a mirrored image. So we're just starting in the opposite direction. And I'm just going to start out again by wrapping around the, in this case, the top base wire, same amount of times as the other side. And then I'm going to bring it over the top of the first 2 base wires, push that down, come up between them so we can go over the top of the next 2. So now we're working our way downwards instead of upwards like before. And here is where we then want to bring it down to be able to wrap around, in this case, the bottom one by itself, which will be the point of this little flourish. Behind again to come up between the top 2 base wires to be able to wrap around over the top of the middle 2. Behind to be able to go over the top of the top two where we started as well. Push that down, and then we're back to the point of just wrapping around, in this case the top one by itself, which is what creates the space in between the flourishes. So again, I'm going to do the same amount, and then you also just want to do another flourish, so we have 2 there on each side. So now I have both sides at the same point there, and then of course these wires are just going quite far out to the side, so we need to bring them back in so we can actually make the length of the bracelet. So I'm going to grab hold of where roughly my weave ends, and then I want to just grab all of the base wires and basically start bringing them back in, so they start coming back straight out in the same direction that they were coming, but then just adding in a bit of a curve like that, and just do the same with the other one. Now I do just want to bring the beads back in as well, just to kind of put them in position so we can see we have the right spacing. So I'm going to place the beads between the 2 sections now. If you're happy with how that's all sitting together, then we can now start actually connecting them. So I'm just going to start with one of my wires at a time. So I'm grabbing the weaving wire. In this case, I'm just taking the top one first. And then I just want to compare with the beads there. You can see it's going to meet up perfectly where my weaving wire ends. What I want to do is just make sure that I'm facing the front outward and the back away. And then I want to just go through literally in a little bit of space there between the bead and the zigzagged wire, and just pull it all the way through gently until we can bring it in. But before I bring it all the way in, I just want to also take the other wire and bring that through the equivalent little gap on the opposite side. So just feed it through there, and again, put it through gently, avoid any kinks or bends in the wire. And I fed both of them through to capture the bead there in a figure-of-8 weave. And then as we bring it all the way up like this to sit in position, I can then bring the respective wires back out to the side where they came from, and then just up between and be in position to continue the weave on the outside section there, which is exactly what we're going to do now. So you just want to pick up the weave where you left it off. In my case, the final wrap I did was the 5th of my 5 single wraps around that inner base wire. So I'm going to go straight into doing my next flourish. If you stopped at a different point, just continue the weave where you stopped it. So I'm going to do a flourish here on this side, obviously on this bottom side as well. And then basically what you want to do is continue doing this outside weave with flourishes that's separated by those individual wraps. And then every time you run into one of these points on the inside beaded section, you want to just capture that in the same way that I showed you down here. And you don't have to do it specific times in the weave. You can just literally catch it whenever you run into it. And also right now is the most fiddly part, because obviously this is still pretty loose. There's only one little section attached, but as soon as we attach the next beaded area as well, it's going to get much sturdier and easier to work with. So you basically just want to keep doing this on both sides, just alternating if you want to, all the way up until we've caught that last bead. So I then continue wrapping here, and what you then want to do is continue the weave just a little bit beyond the beaded section. Then what we need to do is basically replicate the end that we did in the beginning, which means we need to add the curves in first of all, so we can get the base wires to sit right next to each other again, all of them in one group. So just working with one side at a time. I like to keep hold of the group of wires there, kind of just after that last connection point, and then moving all the wires at the same time as if they were one, bring them in towards the other ones, so we get that curve in place, and then I put my fingers further down and then start to bring them back out, so we get that curve into them. And then the same with the other side. And then if you still have a bit of space here from where your weave ends to where your base wires meet up again, you can just extend the weave however much you need to until we get to that point where all the wires are sitting next to each other. And then to keep all these base wires together, I'm just going to take my weaving wire here and start the diagonal wire weave again and literally join up all of them and do a few rounds, just the same amount as we did in the beginning. Then we can get rid of our weaving wires. So I'm just going to flip it to the back, and then you want to make sure that your weaving wire is wrapping around one base wire by itself. That makes it more secure. Just cut off the excess like that, and then take tweezers nose pliers or flat nose and just make sure to push that very end in. And I just like to roll it in the direction that the wrap is going, kind of tucks it away in between the base wires. Just do that with the rest of them as well, and of course the other end. And then we need to finish off the base wires, so I'm going to cut down all the base wires minus the outer two, so the one on either side. So I'm just going to start with one of them, doesn't matter where, and I want to cut them down so they just come out from the weave a little bit, so there's a short little end, something like that. And then I like to just use that wire that I just cut down to guide where I need to cut the rest of them. So I just put the back of my pliers against that wire and then move on to the next one, cut that, and then that automatically gets the same size, and continue with the rest, like I said, minus the outer two. So we end up with this straight line across, and then the last two wires there, the very outer ones, one at a time I'm going to grab on with my tweeze nose pliers and make a bend right where the other ones are cut off and bring it towards the other one. So it's basically going to lay straight across, and then the other one is coming in the opposite direction, so something like this. And they are now laying on top of each other, and then we just want to go in and cut off the excess because obviously they're sticking out quite a bit. So I'm going to cut them off one at a time, both right in the middle there where they basically would meet up. So the first one there, and then the other one I'm going to cut so that when it's cut, the two ends of the wire will fit just perfectly. So because we finished off the end like this so it has a straight line across, the ribbon ends are going to fit on just perfectly and there's not too much bulk inside of them. But before I add them, I just want to add some glue. So I just take a bit onto a toothpick and then apply that first of all on the end of the bracelet, just a little bit in between all of the wires there. And then I also and mainly want to add it inside of the actual ribbon end. So just make sure to cover the walls. We don't need to fill it up completely because if you add too much glue, it's just going to come spilling out once we clamp down the ribbon end. Then I want to place it on the end where I also added the glue. And then basically you want to clamp it down. So you can see here from the side that it's open. We want to clamp that down so it's going to grip around the wires. So I like to just hold it in my hand and put a finger on either side to keep it in place. And then take the flat nose pliers and just go ahead and gently start pushing it down. I like to go back and forth and do it a little at a time, and then remove my fingers and just make sure it's still in the middle because it can slip a little bit while you're doing it. And if you're happy with how it sits, go in and do your final squeeze, make it nice and tight. And also I like to go in from the sides as well. And then we've attached the ribbon end on one end. Of course, you need to leave the glue to dry. And we then have a loop here where we can attach our findings. And of course, also do the same on the other end. So all that's left to do now is shape the bracelet. So I like to just go in and use my hands and fingers. Make sure the front of the bracelet is outwards, so facing towards you, and the back is facing away. And you just want to gradually add in more and more of a curve. Go back and forth. So don't just go into one place and do a big bend. That'll put it out of shape, but just gradually add a curve in, moving from one side to the other. And of course, the goal is to then get the two ends close to each other in the right shape so we can then use the clasp. So that is how you make this Harlequin Wirework bracelet. Now I do have both of these for sale in my shop, so if you're interested, I'm going to leave a link in the description box down below. And there you can also sign up to a newsletter to not miss any future updates. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.